Did your business survive blackout PT 2020? That's what I'm calling it. You could put a hashtag in front of it. Let's break down the meaning behind business continuity with Jason Cummings from RBC Royal Bank Trinidad and Tobago. We'll be right back. Welcome. Good morning to the live series Straight Off the Bat, a show that covers the need to revive, survive, and adapt to new normal of COVID 19. Join us on Thursdays as we speak to individuals across multiple industries who will help you understand financial literacy and education. If you're joining us from LinkedIn, give us a little smash there on the follow button and don't forget to like our page to continue seeing content that will help you manage your money. Today, we're discussing smart succession planning for family businesses in Trinidad and Tobago. We have the great privilege to talk to Jason Cummings. He has an international MBA with a specialization in international finance from Lockjack Global School of Business. He's also the area vice president, small business banking, RBC Royal Bank Trinidad and Tobago, where he leads a team of 13 sales professionals who manage the business accounts for the bank's commercial banking line of business. So we have a lot to learn from him, including me, because I have a lot of questions. He also loves to run, so we're going to bring him in and find out what he can teach me about running, especially after my recent sign up for my next Ironman. So I hope he can give me some tips on running there. So, Jason, hi.
Hi, Pauline. Morning and welcome to your viewers, our viewers, LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever.
YouTube. We
YouTube.
everywhere. We everywhere.
Yeah, we like salt.
Basically. So we want to talk about, the timing of the blackout last night. And for those out there who survived not having your phone and being on social media, I even saw a friend who posted on his Instagram when your car turns into your bedroom because he was that desperate to continue scrolling through his phone. Let's talk about business continuity. Before we even get into this whole idea of succession planning with family businesses, what does business continuity mean?
Well, and I'm glad you started off by referencing the events of yesterday. I think of business continuity, and we were speaking offline before. I mean, and this is a specialized part of business management that has become so important over the last couple of years, given changes in technology, geopolitical interferences, weather and climate changes. It's about how does a business change continue when adverse interferences come into its way. I would say in a nutshell, that's business continuity. And when I look at today, what happens the day after an event or an occurrence happens? How is the business prepared to continue in its operations? What has to change for it to continue to survive and to operate to satisfy the needs of its clients and its stakeholders? So that's my own interpretation and definition of business continuity.
Now, I could see some similarities in this idea of insurance, right? Because there's this risk of what will happen if you go outside and something happens to you, what's going to happen to your family. But when it comes to business, how does one translate that so the layman person can understand there's this risk involved? Because I find, and I saw this in a in a recent, I love a show called Insecure. It's on HBO, and
Okay.
one of the episodes was about death, and specifically Black families don't like to have that conversation because personally I've tried to have that conversation, and it's either don't worry, God will find a way, or don't worry about that. That's not for you to study. So
Yeah.
in that same mindset and culture, how does one say, okay, listen, you need to actually not just have insurance, but you need to have a plan A, B, and C?
Yeah, and you're correct. I mean, that is something, it's morose. We don't like to think about it, but it's inevitable, Pauline. And as much as we take care of ourselves and all that we can do to, at least live as long as we can, eat healthy, avoid certain, lifestyle choices, it's inevitable. So it's sometimes the elephant in the room for most family businesses. What happens after the death of the owner or the matriarch, the chief influencer or decision maker? And I think it brings or that lends itself to having a conversation about continuity. I mean, no one will like to know that they've invested so much of their time and effort in building a business, a brand name, a legacy, and on their departure, it succumbs. So it's about having that conversation pretty early on about how do we continue with this business, not necessarily in its present form, but how do we continue a business operating when the owner or the chief influencer passes on.
And I want to keep on the same theme because I want you to differentiate the difference between a retirement plan and a succession plan. Because as an entrepreneur myself, I tend to try to combine the two, which is obviously not. I can hear my accountant screaming at me because you feel yourself embedded in the business because you think it's the same.
Yeah,
School us.
yeah. So I would say the retirement planning is a subset of succession planning. So let's think of succession planning as macro for the business. What happens to the business when given the unexpected departure of the owner, maybe through death or illness, grave illness, and they can't continue, or it may be defined that, okay, on reaching age 75, 70, whatever, I will be relinquishing reins of power to, these identified individuals. Retirement planning now comes, it's more specific, it's more individual, personalized. How am I going to be maintain a particular lifestyle post my working years? So, how much money am I going to be setting aside for food, consumables, health expenses, accommodation, lodging, even travel? So, it's retirement planning is more specific to an individual. Do I have enough income to support myself during my post working years? Whereas succession planning is deals with a business and how is that business going to continue in the absence of its owner and, as I say, influencer and chief decision maker. I
No,
hope that helps clarify the distinction.
I think so, and I remember an interview I saw with Bill Gates. It was about the startup, this idea of being from the garage and all the things when he moved out the garage, the different stages of building the business. And one of the things that stood out to me was he said he wanted to focus on building enough funding to have at least a year worth of salary
Hmm.
so he can actually focus on sales. So
Yeah.
when it comes to that succession planning and looking at the different sort of buckets of, hey, this is the possibility of the electricity going, which I
Blackout
mean,
22.
if I was a betting person, I would have lost money because I wasn't seeing that coming.
Yeah.
But at the same time, how what's the top three things that you have to put into your succession planning when you have that business?
Yeah. So you talk about that, you know, no one knew the electricity was going, but we could have probably planned for electricity going, you know. Um, so I think having a formal document, a formal policy statement saying and identifying, okay, on departure of the owner, this individual will be assuming the reins of power. The second thing will be identifying and clearly stating, because what you don't want on the departure of the individual, of the owner, is ambiguity. What now do we do with the assets? What now, how are the liabilities going to be treated? Right? So you want to have clarity on that. And I would say, thirdly, is how will be the profits and the future generational wealth, how will that be distributed, right? So I think, and probably getting ahead of myself, you want to have part of the planning of succession planning is engaging a couple important stakeholders to your business, including your accountant, a lawyer, and I mean, like myself, your trusted banker, because you want to ensure that everyone is clear as to how things are supposed to operate when you are no longer around.
I think that's definitely the difficulty there. The idea of not being around. That's definitely a conversation that you may need to add to that. You said accountant, lawyer, and banker. I feel like you need to add a therapist to that because I just want to say that, guys, like, it's okay. Mental health is important because
For
that
sure.
cultural aspect is so it's almost like it's a big hurdle. And if you can't get over that conversation of we're not here forever, then how are you actually going to have that succession planning? And I want to talk about what you said earlier about legacy,
Yeah.
and making sure that you have that plan, making sure that you're speaking to the right people. And when you are within, let's, hone in on the fact that it's a family business,
Yeah.
what's the first step in making sure that that legacy continues? Because it's one thing to say, let's have a plan, but if you don't have sort of the rhythm of business, how are you going to actually make that plan?
Yeah. So it involves some amount of soul searching by the family owners, um, because what you may experience and recognize is that for the business to continue, depending on the, I guess, the structure, the internal composition of the management and leadership team, you may not, that capability and leadership may not reside within the organization. So you may have to make a call to step out and hire, let's say, a professional to run the business in over a period of time. So you're not relinquishing ownership, but you're relinquishing some amount of leadership and control within defined parameters. And I think what has to be done is that this has to be documented. So you don't want to have, because what you don't want is, as I said, the owner expires or has to leave, because they're gravely ill, and there's uncertainty, there's ambiguity. You have customers calling, what's going on? Production may be halted. You have bankers and, let me just say, financiers on the whole concerned about their, the funds that they have employed in the business. So you want to remove and eliminate as far as possible a lot of that ambiguity and doubt. So it's about being clear in your mind while you are alive or able to make the decisions together with your management team and family owners members.
That was mentioned previously in a session we had a couple weeks ago with Mr. Hamid about the business opportunities and looking
Yes.
externally for the skill set necessary. I can see that being so important. And in this day and age right now, you just have to do what's difficult and get over yourself.
Yes.
Which is easier said than done. But
For sure.
what we want to do is we're gonna go on a quick break. But when we come back, we're gonna actually look at some common problems, tap into Jason's experience, and figure out some of the common problems that family businesses face when it comes to no succession planning. So we'll be right back. and welcome back to Straight Off the Bat, a show that covers the need to revive and survive and adapt to the new normal of COVID-19. If you're joining us from YouTube, smash that subscribe button. Yes, I sound like a YouTuber. I want to believe that I'm young, so just go with it. Make sure to follow our page to continue seeing content that'll help you manage your money. Today, we're discussing smart succession planning for family businesses in Trinidad and Tobago. And we have the privilege of Jason Cummings, who's joining us. He is the area vice president at RBC Royal Bank, Trinidad and Tobago, and he has 13 sales professionals who he manages to help within the bank's commercial banking line of business. So we want to tap into that knowledge, and he also loves running. So let's bring back in Jason and have a discussion about running because running is a very difficult sport, and some of the advice that you previously gave Jason was difficult because change is difficult. So how do you kind of balance? Because for me, I do a few things as well.
Right.
Um, how do you find running influences how your day goes?
So I would say, well, before I start off, I need to acknowledge my running group, One More Milers, um, and my running coach, Richard Jones. So a little free airplay there for Richard and the OMMers. Um, I would say, Pauline, on a serious note, particularly since the onset of the pandemic, uh, running has become a staple and a mainstay for me for two reasons. The obvious, the physical benefits, but it's also helped me from a mental health perspective. So I have a schedule, I have a plan. I have certain goals I want to achieve in terms of the running, but it also helps me de-stress and for a little bit or a couple hours, forget about the problems of the day. But what I have found, interestingly, is yeah. So I woke up a sweat. My heart rate goes up. But then I am also, for some reason, I guess not surprisingly, but the creative juices then flow. So I may be tackling a problem or being wondering how to broach a difficult subject or have a conversation with either a team member or client, and it kind of comes while running, how best I could deal with it. On the physical end, I've been able to bring down my averages, see my endurance go up. And it's just been fun as well, to be at nature at times, being outside on a trail or on the open road.
That's awesome. And just for the peak of interest of the runners out there, what's the longest distance you ever ran?
Oh no, I'm a half marathon specialist at this point. I know
Specialist, she
you
says. Okay,
well.
love it. Richard would be proud.
Yeah.
Awesome, awesome.
But
Yeah,
I know you mentioned you do your triathlons and whatnot. So that's the ultimate goal. But yeah,
yeah.
that's where I'm
Oh,
at right
nice,
now. Yeah.
nice. Well, one day you could join us. The next stop is Mexico for half Ironman, 70.3 miles. So that'll be fun. That'll be fun.
Yeah. Right. 70. Okay. Hmm.
Yeah, but it's not all running. It's a swimming and some cycling. The cycling is the biggest one, but it's quite a journey. And when it comes to, as you mentioned earlier, how you see the difference. For me, like my day is completely different if I
Yeah.
don't train first thing in the morning, and I see problems being less. I wouldn't say less stressful, but I can handle it better. Um,
Correct. They
and
don't go
fa-
away, but
Mhm.
your reaction to them, yeah, much
Yes,
better. Yeah.
definitely. And when it comes to family businesses, and we're talking about succession planning here, what are the most common problems you've seen when it comes to businesses in Trinidad and Tobago?
Yeah. So, you know, I was that's called tree. Sometimes the business just stops. It holds. So it's like almost literally what to do. So decisions are left unattended. And these decisions that are left unattended have grave consequence. So imagine, let's say you're running a plant and for whatever reason, the owner succumbs, is no longer wrong. Some people may not know, okay, what we're going to run on the shift, the quantities of materials that need to be added in. I mean, it may sound ridiculous, but that is a possibility. So some decisions are just, left unattended, and in some cases, in an extreme case, the production operations grinds to a halt. And these things have consequences. So clients don't get their product. There's no sale. Eventually, your creditors will be making demands. What happens? Employees don't get paid, and there may, at some point, a adverse or ultimate reaction to that is they could withhold their services. What we've also seen in some cases is that the business continues, but there's some infighting among the family members that, I guess, let's say, jockeying for their position on the throne. And it could be very inconsistent, unprofessional when dealing with stakeholders. That, infighting, you may have siblings not carrying on conversations among themselves, or making decisions without consulting others. So the business continues, but it's almost in a topsy-turvy state because there is no, I guess, commonality of thought by the decision makers at that point in time. And a third problem you could encounter is that financial institutions could say, you know what, we are pausing our extending any further credit here to this business. We are concerned about its management, because one of the things bankers look at, not only the ability for the business to repay the funds lent, but is this business going to be around for some time? Definitely as longer than the period of the loan. But if there's uncertainty as to who's in charge, how decisions are being made, you may find banks or financial institutions taking a pause on funding future projects.
Huh. I find that very interesting, and I wanted to elaborate on that more because uh, from your space, being in on the banking side, and you're seeing this, how does on your end, how are you aware that this is happening? Can you translate that through the
Yeah.
numbers? How do you know that this is going on in the business?
So sometimes, I mean, and this is very real, we may get two sets of instructions for different two sets of instructions from different stakeholders within the business, um, and you may also get simultaneously, please ignore any instruction sent by party X, or vice versa, right? I mean, staying close to the numbers, you may see there may also be a request not to share information to particular party, to particular parties. So we sometimes we may get you know be caught in the middle as to in the family squabble.
Fascinating. I just envision an episode of Bold and Beautiful there. I didn't even think about it like that, but you can actually translate the business through the information that's being sent to the bank. And I could see, from an employee perspective as well, how does that, like, I've actually been in family businesses where you see any squabbling happening, and then you actually are worried about your salary.
Yeah.
Talk about the effects on the employees as well.
No, well, I mean, it's real, because I imagine at the end of the day, you have your loyalties, but you definitely want to be paid on either a weekly or fortnightly or monthly basis. When I imagine any employee recognizes instability within the organization in which they work, there will be cause for concern. Is my salary assured at the next pay period? and that creates a different level, a new level of anxiety. So you may have, you're dealing with market conditions, how competitive my product is, or quality issues. But then, could I get paid after I've worked, for a particular period of time? Can I, will this business continue to exist in its current form? And then can I, my own self, continue to make my obligations to the bank or and to support my family? So that could be pretty nerve wracking for employees as well.
Can you speak a bit on the effects of what that means for the business? Because when it comes to small businesses, that one person usually does 100 things.
Yeah.
So if that person feels that instability and leaves, what happens to the business? Because I can imagine that's a huge gap.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a big risk. So, and I guess that goes with the whole business continuity team. Um, yeah, a key stakeholder within the operation, seeing and observing this, ambiguity, discontent, distrust among family members, and say, you know what, I'm not sticking around for this. I will seek my departure. And we have seen where, key employees, or I would say, they may not be have financially contributed to the business, but they have institutional memory of the business operations that they leave. There's no structure or system to that has been documented about their own processes, and yeah, as you said, there's a gap. So some they may be rehired, or the position will be, there's a vacancy, they'll advertise, but that there was no handover. In an extreme case, there's no handover, warm handover. Hopefully there's some sharing or notes that were left behind to be able to pick up on and assess, how do I do this job. But it can be extremely debilitating to the continuity and successful continuity of a business if a key employee leaves a business during that time.
Do you have any tips or a specific instruction that you can give to someone listening to this who may have experienced that or in that position where someone's leaving? What specifically should they do to avoid that drain of information from the business?
Yeah. So I imagine for sure having a defined uh, business continuity plan, and included in that will be, the topic we've discussed on succession plan. So you're talking about having manuals of best practices, guides, job aids, go-to cheat sheets, that sort of thing. So those are like at the basic. So, and it could help with, an individual who may be going on some sort of predetermined leave or that falls ill. And I'll tell you, Pauline, we've seen this particularly during COVID, with individuals be being called away or being away from their desks for a period of time unexpectedly, but the business is expected to continue. So I would say having, your operating manuals, your employee guidelines, and up to date, double checked, refreshed, particularly with the times, we are conducting this interview virtually. There's not much, at least in our space, very limited opportunities for physical interaction. So, even having those guidelines virtually or available online will be beneficial for the continued success of a business, I will say.
That's a lot. I think, especially as a business owner, you have to shift because a lot of times you are focusing on sales, bringing in money,
Yes.
and then you're like, oh, wait a minute, there's this thing happening with my, you know, family member who's within the business, and then on top of that, I have to make sure there's documentation. There's a lot happening, so I really want to know where to start when it comes to this plan, because if someone sit down, listen to this, and understand that these are all the things I need to do, and have nowhere to go in terms of where do I start, we want to pick your brain, Jason. But right after the break, we will have a discussion on what's the bullet point list when we are starting this succession planning document. We'll be right back.
But that was like my first experience with money. Very, very first experience.
I've been in banking since I was a teenager.
And welcome back to Straight Off the Bat, a show that covers the need to revive, survive, and adapt to new normal of COVID-19. If you're joining us from Facebook, sorry about that, guys. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty, so you'd have missed the first 30 minutes, but don't worry. You can always check back when the live is over because it's a video that never leaves the internet, so it's there for you. But don't forget to like and follow us on our page to continue seeing content that'll help you manage your money. Today, we're discussing smart succession planning for family businesses in Trinidad and Tobago, and we have the privilege of discussing it with Jason Cummings. He is the Area Vice President of Business Banking at RBC Royal Bank Trinidad and Tobago. He has a wealth of knowledge within the commercial sector, and we want to pick his brain even more when it comes to this idea of succession planning. And if you're a small business owner, relying on your family members, this is definitely the conversation for you. And we had a previous guest, which is Mr. Hamid. We spoke about the business opportunities. He gave really good insight on, why we start with family businesses, because a lot of times, you have no money. So capital is the people who will work for you for free. But at the same time, as the business grows, you have new problems. As an entrepreneur, problems never end. So with Jason in the mix, we're going to have the conversation. We're going to bring him in and have him give us where to start. We want to find out, we heard the discussion. It makes sense. What's the 3 bullet points when it comes to starting that succession plan for your family business?
So I would say, Pauline, first of all, is acknowledging that there's the need for a plan. And having what I will suggest having a formal document that will guide this. What you want to also do is identify, what are the unique skill sets or the assets which the person who is leaving, what do they bring to the organization right now, and how can we imitate those skills and the assets which they bring to the table. Because we now have to, let's say, find a substitute for them. So we have to also identify the list of capabilities the loss will constitute to the enterprise. So it could be, maybe this person has, let's say, a secret ingredient or a secret formula to make, I don't know, some piece or item of food or delicacy or whatever the case may be. Is there an opportunity to document and retain? Probably has to be patented, licensed, because those are the secret ingredients that have assisted and aided in maintaining the business success to date. And you want to, as far as possible, to maintain that going forward, right? You also want to have very clearly timelines for. You may have, for instance, in some cases, minors who are dependents or associated with the business, that you may want them to be involved in the business at a particular point in time. An interesting concept I have observed in a couple of family-owned businesses in Trinidad is the individuals can allowed to go abroad, even locally, to study and obtain their formal qualifications, but they then enter the industry for probably a period of time, maybe 2 to 3 years, private sector industry, private sector mostly, and then they are allowed to come into the family-owned business. I suspect that allows them to have an opportunity to witness and observe how businesses independent of their own are run, and there are takeaways, best practices that can be employed in their own family owned business. So having a formal document, understanding what are the unique skill sets and assets that the founder business owner brings and is likely that we are likely to lose, and having specific timelines as to when parts of the plan will kick in. So when will maybe a granddaughter or grandson would be allowed to assume a leadership role, or be allowed to run a particular segment of the business. Having those things clearly articulated will help in creating an effective succession plan.
Now, what are some of the financial repercussions of not having a succession plan?
Well, I could tell you as a banker, selfishly, we may not be able to get repaid if there's no succession plan. But I mean, that's in one case. As I mentioned earlier, you have unsatisfied clients. In the case of where the business operations are completely disrupted, due to that ambiguity, what happens next, who's in charge, who where do we get suppliers, that sort of thing. So inability to continue the business has that many knockoff effects. One being the inability to generate revenue to pay for what's needed, to repay uh, creditors, to who form a very significant part in funding the business, and then ultimately, I mean, this goes straight and can hit the pockets of the owners, where you know on the extreme end you have losses, claims on the business. You may have people initiating lawsuits for non-payment, and a variety of adverse consequences can come about without when there's no succession plan in place.
I'm still actually ruminating about what you said before on the fact that the bank could tell when there's something happening because you're getting instructions from two different individuals, and that's still mind-boggling to me because it makes so much sense.
Yeah,
And then obviously you have this idea of what type of credit are you going to build and then lose if you don't have these things in place? And when it comes to, hiring somebody externally, because you mentioned as well the fact that the skill set may not be actually within your family.
yeah,
And I can imagine that being difficult to have to work around,
yeah.
because when you start your business and you say, okay, this is 4 years, 4 or 5 years down the road, we are doing well. What is the key indicator that you have to hire externally?
Yeah. That's usually a difficult conversation family members may have. Um, we have to they will have to recognize the skill and the experience. It just isn't resident within the family. Um, you know, let's say, I don't know, maybe in the case of agricultural processing, the business owner, first generation, you know, started off, well, it's a passion, then became, well, a hobby, passion, turned into a business. But his or her offspring may not be interested, may not have any, you know, uh, idea, clue, or that's not that's not their thing, right? But the business is doing well, so they've moved from uh, rearing, let's say, animals or growing crops into added going down the value chain and doing some maybe processing. But no one has an interest, no one has studied agricultural processing or agribusiness, or even marketing, perhaps. So it may just be not a related skill, and that sometimes, as a parent, it's a toss up. You know, I would like the legacy to continue, but then your children are not interested in it. So, but the business is doing well. It has a solid name in the market, and creating wealth for the family, which you want to continue. So in that particular case, if the offspring are not interested, I would say it's about having a conversation and itemizing that, maybe, well, for us to continue enjoying the fruits of this business, we just will have to hire an external person, a professional, to continue uh, running the business.
And let's shift now to a less obvious scenario where, let's say, for instance, you are in a business like the airline business, and you have a travel agency, and needless to say, that has a huge impact, and has been impacted by the pandemic. But
Yeah.
there's a pivot that's necessary, and within your family business, you're not seeing the skill set for that digital transformation. you know Sometimes I've experienced it where, the sales are going down. It seems obvious to, let's say, the employee who doesn't have the same last name, but it doesn't seem obvious to the person who owns the business.
Yeah.
Maybe we can equip that employee with the right skill sets to have that conversation of what next.
Yeah. So and that's a great point and observation. Um, so yeah, the offspring not interested, but you have an employee very capable. Um, I've also seen, organizations make it part of their HR policy to, provide on-the-job training, or even to support to some extent, furthering the employees' education. Um, what you may also find in some form is, at least it, obviously well defined, is a share, or a minor share offering. So it allows you, that employee then becomes has the opportunity to have a stake in the business. So that's also, a possibility and an option that could be taken if the offspring, the owners, children, or dependents are just are not interested, or they themselves don't have the skill set to continue. Because I do like that example, that parallel you drew with the airline industry, and having need to change, particularly last couple of years, to having maybe more a digital influence, um, but it's just not possible right now, given the offspring just not having any interest, or not being able to convert or step up, as you said, to pivot to that level required.
Gonna put you on a spot now. Does
Mhm.
RBC have any resources, RBC Royal Bank Trinidad and Tobago, that they, like, a small business owner could go and check out?
Yeah. So I will say, we do have on our website, RBC Caribbean / business. There are a couple nuggets there on business succession. Um, I will also recommend that you reach out to your trusted relationship manager, for some, to further the conversation, because this business, Pauline, I will definitely say, is not a one size fits all, and it's definitely unique to the circumstances of the business, its industry, management structure, ownership structure. We also want to consider the level of your borrowings with us. So I will also suggest, have reach out to a relationship manager and have a conversation about, what your thoughts are on succession planning.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? Because I'm also guilty of not tapping into resources. So when you say reaching out to your relationship manager, what does that conversation look like? Is it, hey, there's this thing happening in my business and I need your help, your advice? Like, where does one begin with that conversation?
Yeah. So, I mean, we will not be giving any, for sure, any legal advice or, this is what you need to do. We'll probably very much highlight or uh, reinforce the risks to the business if certain things are not done. I would have mentioned earlier a couple stakeholders you will definitely need to incorporate in that conversation. I would suggest a lawyer and an accountant or financial planner as well. So that combination of stakeholders will definitely need to be part of a conversation for you in discussing your succession planning.
Okay, so what we're going to do a quick summary of the discussion we've had for the last 45 minutes and take out your notepad because when we come back, we will just squeeze a little bit more out of Jason to get his information on what you need to do to have smart succession planning for your business in Trinidad and Tobago. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Straight Off the Bat, a show that covers the need to revive, survive, and adapt to new normal of COVID-19. If you're joining us from LinkedIn, don't forget to smash that follow button and continue seeing content that will help you manage your money. Today, we're discussing smart succession planning for family businesses in Trinidad and Tobago with the great privilege of Jason Cummings, who is giving us like amazing insight. If you have missed it, don't worry. When the live is over, the video is going to be there. You can also hop over to YouTube and subscribe to us. We actually post snippets that are specific to you. So we're going to bring Jason in and just do a summary of the discussion we've been having over the last 50 minutes where we discuss succession planning. For those who may have missed it, Jason, can you just share with our audience what a succession plan is?
Yeah. So thanks, Pauline. And as I said at the start, it's a pretty hard task for me to come the morning after of the blackout. And when I think of succession planning, I think of business continuity the morning after the owner is no longer on the business. And this could be either having come at a defined period or maybe suddenly, unfortunately, through death or illness. So having a succession plan is about how is the business going to operate in the absence of the business owner and key influencer.
Now, in the same theme of Blackout TT 2022, what advice or actually what would be the ideal scenario, because this is something nobody planned for, but
Yeah.
I could imagine if you have a restaurant and you'd have obviously planned a certain amount of food, you'd have bought food that day knowing that you would have had specific orders and you would have employed people for that day knowing that this was the case. But this thing that nobody planned for happened. What in the scenario A, if you had a succession plan, what that would look like, and B, if you didn't have it, what, because obviously there's a loss of revenue there.
Yeah. So, well, starting before we get the succession plan, you talk about restaurants, food. So we're hoping that the business continuity process calls for having adequate storage facilities, to keep items you know fresh as long as possible. Um, so that'll be one thing. You also have to consider what about the crew or the team members that can't work because you don't have any power. your ability to get information to them, that has to be defined. That there should be no hiccups like I'm wandering or people on their way and then they meet a locked business place. So having all those items beforehand, it will be key. In the event of this is what you do, coming to a succession plan, I think it's all about having in your mind, and as much as we don't want to think about the worst thing happening, we have to plan for the worst. So from the owner, general manager come down, in the event we are out of electricity, even water is also a consideration. This uh, these features kick in, these protocols kick in, so everyone knows their part. I will also say, and it's a common feature in our space. Well, when we are at least definitely in the physical workplace, is having drills, having practice sessions, having made up scenarios. Um, so what ifs, you know, and while those, and try to exhaust as many of those what if scenarios. I mean, a reaction to a what if is do nothing, and I imagine you pay the price for that. But it's about having as many plan A's, B's, and C's as there are to allow for the continued operation of the business.
And it's as an entrepreneur, I'm hearing this and I'm like, yeah, I could see that, and I'm just like, oh, but I want to get more sales,
Yeah,
because it's like I want to focus on bringing in money, because as much as you say, these things are important to build your credit, understand that you have to pay a loan, but if you don't pay your loan, then obviously it doesn't matter what happens.
yeah.
So just give us a little advice, the entrepreneurs out there that's watching this, when it comes to prioritizing. Do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, I would say set aside some time for planning. As much as you will think about the product and the markets you want to enter, think about all that goes with the risks associated with them, and what do I need to get to that level? What do I need to stop doing to get to that st- level? Who are the contacts I need to make and to initiate? I mean, from a government perspective, there are tons of agencies, started in the Ministry of Trade and Industry, um, that have a lot of support and guidance programs. The Ministry of I believe it's labor and entrepreneurial business. There's a lot available there as well. Um, and I also say share your thoughts and your ideas and what you want to do with your bankers. See us not only as the providers of credit, but as partners with you on this journey. Because other than the financial advice, we could be talking about how do I get my business online, how can I explore particular markets, what linkages can the banks facilitate there for me.
I think that's great advice, and it's something that over time it's like a learned behavior, like with your running and my journey of learning to swim 6 years ago.
Right.
You have to keep telling yourself, what is the end result? What do you want out of it? Because it's you and I could sit down here and have a conversation, but the folks out there, when you're in it, you kind of head down, not trying to study anything but making that money. We have to
Yeah.
take that moment to come out of it and say, hey, this is actually important. And with somebody who has your wealth of experience, what's the biggest, I don't want to say well, failure, but what's the sort of the missing element of succession planning in businesses? What have you seen with family businesses in Trinidad and Tobago?
Um, I would say, sometimes what we've observed is a level of, I would say, maybe a lack of interest by dependents and offsprings. Um, I mean, this list could be very long and, way beyond our allotted time. Um, but sometimes not having or wanting to expose the dependents and offspring to, let's say, the as many or as much as the not so pleasant parts of the business. And that could be, from a parental point of view, trying to protect and, shield. Um, and I think sometimes not being open enough to the offspring and the dependents as to all that the business has to offer. Because there will be, as much as there are great times and there's a legacy, there are also challenges which businesses have to encounter, when they have to explore or enter new markets and, pound the pavement and get certain linkages and deal with certain um, government agencies. I don't know if that's always seen by the offspring and the dependents. Sometimes what we've witnessed is there's sometimes a level of, wanting to hold on and not, could be a matter of trust and ability to say, this is all these are all the assets, this is all the income we are earning. So there's a bit of that as well. Um, and I think sometimes it's just also a case of, I'm not sure if you can do it as good as I can, and I have over the last couple of years, you know. So, I mean, I wouldn't put any in a particular order, but that's sort of randomly. Those are some of the issues we see, and it's unfortunate that a business owner, first generation, has toiled, spent a lot of time to build up a business, and it's not always. I mean, we have tons of examples of successfully run family-owned businesses with intergenerational activity. Some in their second and third generation that have done quite well to reinvent themselves, explore new markets, go digital. You know, um, do a lot of expansion in the region, become foreign exchange earners. There are tons. I mean, and the chambers and the business associations are replete with examples. So it's a mixed bag, but I think that we definitely appreciate and know there's a place for family-owned businesses in Trinidad. And I will say, we just want, and I hope through this series and others that BATT offers, we can continue to support family-owned businesses.
Thank you so much for that, Jason. And when you're talking about, offsprings not wanting to get into business, I can't help but think about all this generation who has basically grown up with the internet.
Yeah,
So the idea of Facebook, aka well Meta, aka Facebook, creating these virtual worlds and I have friends, their kids are 2 and they can't live without cocoa melon.
yeah.
So that individual, I can't see them wanting to do a traditional trajectory in their life. And I also could empathize with somebody, as you mentioned, toiling away, and then your son is like, I want a game for a living. I don't know, Jason. Should we? Do you have any advice for that conversation? Am I asking too much?
Yeah, no, I mean, I imagine as a parent that'll be very difficult. You know, what do you do? I mean, I will take comfort and solace in that. I have at least exposed you. I have given you the opportunity. Um, you have enjoyed the spoils of this, and this can be yours as well. But yeah, I think it is difficult to digest as a parent, not being able to to win over that, yeah, I'm all gone ho. I mean, as in the same breath, there are tons of, children and offsprings who want to get into the family-owned business. There's like no way I'm going to work for someone else, and I just want to maintain continue this legacy. So we have many of those as well, and we just have to continue supporting them.
Awesome. And on that note on legacy, thank you so much to Jason Cummings for joining us today and sharing insight into succession planning for family businesses. Don't forget to sign up and be notified on your next live show via the links in the comments below. And Jason did mention some RBC resources. What we usually do is send that directly to your email. So just sign up and you'll get that. As always, be sure to like and follow us on LinkedIn so you don't miss a single live show. And thank you so much for joining us. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.